The music had already shifted into something slower, something meant for holding, not dancing. But there she was, laughing like she'd just heard the funniest joke in her life. His hand was on her waist. Her fingers played with the stem of her glass like she wasn't married, like I didn't exist. I stood maybe 10 feet away. I could have thrown my drink at the back of his stupid tailored jacket. I didn't. I just watched. They say betrayal has a sound. Some poetic nonsense about hearts cracking or silence screaming. That's a lie. Betrayal doesn't sound like anything. It feels like heat rising into your ears and fingertips. It feels like your legs turning into stone, like blinking hurts, like your chest is too tight for your lungs to be useful. It feels like watching your wife flirt with a man who isn't you. In public, at a ballroom full of people who also aren't you, while you just stand there. But no one tells you what happens after that. Because the moment she turned her head and saw me watching, really watching, she didn't flinch. She didn't rush over. She didn't hide. She smiled. Not at me. Through me. That was the moment. That was the one that cracked the illusion I'd been dragging around for months like a rotting backpack. It wasn't the late nights, or the silence at dinner, or the smell of someone else's soap on her skin last Thursday. It was that smile. That unbothered, elegant, cruel little smile. So I did what any man would do. No, not walk away. I walked toward them, and I said 7 words that made her stop smiling. But I'll tell you what those words were soon. First, I need you to understand what kind of woman Clara is. Because this wasn't the first time she vanished behind a mask, and it wasn't the first time I caught her slipping. Clara never liked scarves. She said they made her feel restricted. Ironic, considering how good she was at wrapping people around her little finger. But one morning, 2.5 months before the masquerade, I found a red silk scarf in the bottom drawer of our dresser. Not her drawer. Mine. Stuffed underneath my winter socks like a secret trying not to breathe. It smelled like her perfume. But not quite. It was a little too floral. A little too new. At first, I told myself it must have been hers. Maybe a gift from a client. Maybe she'd just stashed it there in a hurry. But Clara never put anything in my drawers. Not since we started doing our laundry separately. Another sign I chose to ignore, chalking it up to boundaries, like her therapist called them. I waited 3 days to ask her about it. That's what I do. Wait, overthink, hesitate, rehearse entire conversations in my head. And when I finally brought it up, during breakfast while she scrolled on her phone, she barely glanced up and said, "What scarf?" I described it, told her where I found it. She frowned, shrugged, said she didn't know anything about it, and then, get this, accused me of planting it to start drama. I laughed, out loud. It was that or scream. She just went back to reading emails. That night, she came home later than usual. She said it was a networking dinner. But when I checked the location on the Find My app, the little blue d hovered over a street with no restaurants. Just condos. Upscale ones. I didn't ask her about it. Not that night. Not the next. I started collecting small things instead. Pieces. Glances. Missed calls. A text message she swiped away a little too quickly. A receipt for wine I never tasted. For dinners I wasn't invited to. She wasn't stupid. She knew I was noticing. But she also knew me. She knew I'd do nothing. Because I always did nothing. Until the night of the ball. That night, when she smiled past me, through me, like I wasn't even breathing. That was when I felt something snap. Like the knot I'd tied around all the red flags just came undone at once. So when I walked up to them, her and Mr. Burgundy mask, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw a drink. I leaned in, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "She left her red scarf at your place." He blinked. She froze. The music kept playing, but their world went silent. I smiled, and I walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Clara curled up on the far edge of the bed, fully dressed, makeup still on, pretending to sleep. She never said a word after the ball. She just sat in the car in silence, scrolling through her phone with shaking fingers, avoiding my eyes the entire drive home. I wanted her to say something. Anything. An insult. A confession. A lie. But she gave me silence, the kind that swells in your ears until it turns into noise. That's the kind of silence that drowns people. Around 4:30 a.m., I got up. I couldn't take it anymore. I wandered into the living room, sat on the couch, stared at her purse on the side table. It was unzipped. She never leaves it unzipped. Claire's the kind of woman who alphabetizes her nail polish. I told myself not to do it. But I did. I opened it slowly, like I was disarming a bomb. Inside was a crumpled receipt. I unfolded it carefully. Italian restaurant. Table for two. Last Tuesday. At the exact time she told me she was staying late for quarterly review prep. I felt something under the receipt, something small. A folded card. When I opened it, I almost laughed. Until next time, Scarlett. R. I stared at the signature. Just an R. Not even a full name. Like she didn't think he'd need one. Like he was already permanent. I sat there for a long time. Not angry. Just hollow. Like I'd finally reached the bottom of a well I'd been falling into for months. Then I noticed something even stranger. On the back of the card, in Clara's handwriting, were 3 digits. A door code. My heart started racing in the most humiliating way. She'd written it down. She was comfortable enough to write down a code to another man's apartment, and then forget to take it out of her purse. It wasn't just betrayal. It was carelessness. And that hurt more than anything else. I placed the card back exactly as I found it. I zipped her purse. I went back to bed and lay beside her, staring at the back of her head, wondering how many lies fit inside one person's silence. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Like I hadn't detonated a truth bomb in the middle of a ballroom the night before. She made coffee, hummed while she buttered her toast, told me she had yoga at 9 a.m. I smiled and nodded, and followed her. I didn't even have a plan. I just drove 4 cars behind her, heart pounding like I was the one having an affair. She didn't go to yoga. She didn't even head to the studio. She drove to an apartment complex across town. New. Expensive. The kind with digital elevators and lobby art that makes you feel poor. She keyed in the code. 3 digits. The same ones from the card. She walked in. I parked and waited. 10 minutes. 20. 30. I stared at the entrance until my eyes hurt. I didn't want to know what she was doing in there. But I already knew. I almost drove away. But then, as I started the car, she walked back out alone. Except she was holding something in her hand. A different scarf. Green this time. And she was crying. I should have driven away. That would have been the smart thing to do. I had everything I needed. Evidence, confirmation, motive. But no. I sat there watching her walk to her car with that green scarf balled up in one hand like a crime scene she was trying to erase. And something about her face, those red-rimmed eyes, that uneven breath, made me feel like I was the one intruding. I followed her home again, just far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. She didn't even glance in the rear view. She wasn't in a state to notice anything. When she parked, she sat there in the car for a full 5 minutes before finally stepping out and walking toward the house like her body weighed more than it used to. When I walked into the kitchen, she was already inside, pouring water into the kettle like it was just another morning. She didn't look at me, didn't say a word. I said nothing, either, until I noticed the green scarf had been tossed into the trash. That broke me. You didn't even try to hide it this time, I said, barely above a whisper. She froze. Slowly, like something inside her cracked, she turned around. Her eyes were glassy, lips trembling slightly. I don't know how to talk to you anymore, Lowell, she said, and I hated how quiet and broken she sounded. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but she looked like someone already halfway through her punishment. You don't talk to me because you're busy talking to him, I snapped. Do you even remember how it felt to come home to me and not lie? That's when she did something I didn't expect. She sank to the floor, just collapsed like her knees gave up. I stood there frozen, holding a coffee mug that suddenly felt too heavy. She didn't cry, not at first. She just stared at the floor tiles and said, I didn't sleep with him. It hit like a brick to the chest. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But that wasn't the point anymore. You went to him, I said. You planned to. That's worse. She looked up at me, eyes wide and full of something I hadn't seen in a long time, fear. I wasn't going there for that, she whispered. I went to end it. Now it was my turn to be quiet. She went on. It started weeks ago, after that conference in Seattle. I was lonely. You were always working. I felt invisible. But it was stupid. It was nothing. It didn't even get that far. I couldn't go through with it. I almost laughed. Almost. But you kept meeting him, I said flatly. Yes, she nodded. Because I was too much of a coward to end it clean. And because part of me wanted to be wanted, even if it was fake. Silence again. Only this time, it wasn't drowning. It was suffocating. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she said, voice cracking. I didn't want to lie anymore. Not after last night. Last night. The ball. The smile. I remembered how calm she was, how collected. And now here she was, unraveling at my feet like none of that had ever mattered. Why were you crying when you left his place? I finally asked. She hesitated, and then she whispered, because he told me he'd fallen in love with me. I blinked, and I didn't feel anything. That was the first time since this whole nightmare began that I didn't feel like the smallest person in the room. Not better, not vindicated, just level, numb. She didn't love him, but did she still love me? That was the one question she wouldn't answer. And I didn't ask. Not yet. 3 days passed. Not much was said between us after that conversation on the kitchen floor. Clara acted like something heavy had been cut loose from around her ankles, like she could move again, breathe again. But me? I was stuck in a different kind of prison. The one where you get exactly what you thought you wanted, truth, and realize it's not satisfying. It's venom, and it lingers. She started leaving her phone face up again, volunteering details about her day. Once, she even asked if I wanted to go with her to dinner with some coworkers. I said no, not because I didn't want to go, but because I didn't believe she actually wanted me there. Trust doesn't recover in a week or a month. Sometimes it doesn't recover at all, and I needed to know. I needed proof of whether she was done with him, or if all of this was just another layer of manipulation. Clara was good at layers. She could say one thing, show you another, and still keep the truth hidden under a silk scarf and a smile. So, I did something I'm not proud of. I went online and found a guy, a private investigator, not the trenchcoat kind, just some quiet, sharp man named Davis who answered his phone like he was ordering pizza. I gave him Clara's schedule, her plates, the building code I'd memorized from that card. I told him I didn't want anything illegal, no tracking devices or phone tapping. I just wanted eyes, pictures, times, dates, patterns. He didn't ask many questions. 2 days later, he texted me a photo. Clara, leaving work. Alone. Another photo. Clara, at a cafe. With 2 women. Smiling. Normal. The third photo. Clara sitting in her car. Just sitting. No movement. For over 30 minutes. Staring at her steering wheel like it had betrayed her too. Davis called me later and said, she's not meeting him. At least not yet. But she's thinking about something. Hard. I didn't sleep that night. Again, my mind kept bouncing between hope and suspicion like a ball in a dryer. I kept replaying her words. I didn't feel anything. That should have been enough, right? It sounded final. But love is slippery. You can think you're over someone, and then the wind smells like their cologne, and suddenly you're 15 steps backward. The next day, Clara made breakfast for me. Eggs, bacon, toast the way I liked it, with the crusts cut off. She placed the plate down and kissed my cheek. It felt foreign, mechanical. I watched her walk away like I was watching a stranger in my house or my wife's face. And that's when I realized something no man wants to admit. I didn't know how to love her anymore. Not because she cheated, emotionally or otherwise. Not even because she lied. But because somewhere along the line, she became a stranger to me. Or maybe I became one to her. That night, Davis sent one final photo. Clara, in her car again. But this time, she wasn't alone. A man stood beside the car, face partially obscured, talking to her through the window, and her hand was on the door handle, poised to open. I couldn't stop staring at the photo. It was grainy, slightly tilted, probably taken from the passenger seat of a car across the street. But even blurry, I recognized her posture immediately. Shoulders tense, head slightly tilted, mouth half open, like she was either mid-sentence or mid-confession. And the man, his body language was harder to read. Calm, close, not aggressive, not intimate. Just there, present, too present. I texted Davis. Did she open the door? His response came 30 seconds later. No. She sat back, drove away 5 minutes later. I should have felt relief. I should have thanked him, deleted the photo, and moved on with my night. But instead, I grabbed my keys and left the house without saying a word to Clara, who was curled up on the couch watching reruns of some reality show she used to mock. I didn't have a plan. I just knew that if I didn't see it with my own eyes, I'd never sleep again. The apartment complex was quiet when I got there. Gated, well lit, too clean. I parked across the street and waited. Her car wasn't there. Neither was his, as far as I could tell, though, truthfully, I didn't even know what he drove. I sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. An hour passed, then 2, and then I saw her headlights. She pulled in slowly, parked near the edge. She didn't get out right away. Just sat there. Again. Same posture as in the photo. Same energy of a woman balancing on the edge of a decision she didn't trust herself to make. Then the other car pulled in. A silver sedan. Clean. Subtle. He stepped out. Same guy from the ball. I recognized the way he stood, like the world owed him answers. Clara didn't get out of the car. She rolled the window down. He leaned in, one hand on the roof. They talked for a minute. Two. I couldn't hear a thing. I cracked my window like that would help, as if I was in a movie and the wind would carry their voices to me. Then she opened the door. My heart slammed into my throat. But she didn't get out. She stood, half in, half out, arms crossed tight. He said something. She shook her head. He said something else. She nodded. Then, God help me. She stepped away from the car, walked a few feet toward the sidewalk, and slapped him. I flinched. He didn't. She turned and walked straight back to her car. Drove off like her tires hated the pavement. He just stood there watching her leave, rubbing the side of his jaw with a strange little smile on his face. I didn't move. I couldn't. I sat there frozen, watching him disappear into the building like this was all routine. Like being hit by a married woman was just something that happened on Wednesdays. I waited 5 more minutes and then followed her home. I parked 2 houses down and walked the rest of the way, quiet, invisible, like the coward I'd become. Through the window, I saw her in the kitchen, crying, not sobbing, not falling apart, just crying silently over a half-empty glass of wine. When I stepped inside, she didn't hear me at first, so I just stood there, watching her the same way I'd watched her for weeks. From a distance, from behind, from somewhere she'd stopped looking, and I realized something I'd been avoiding for a long time. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about 2 people who forgot how to see each other. I stepped forward. She turned. Her eyes widened like she was about to apologize or defend herself or run. But I didn't give her the chance. I simply asked, "Why did you hit him?" She looked at me for a long time, wiped her face, took a breath, and said, "Because he told me you'd never fight for me." I didn't sleep that night either, not because I was restless, but because she stayed up with me. We didn't talk. We just existed in the same space again. Her curled in the armchair, legs tucked under herself like she used to do back in the first apartment we shared. Me lying sideways on the couch, staring at the shadowed ceiling, wondering how 2 people could feel so far apart while breathing the same air. Around 4 a.m., she finally spoke. "You don't know what it's like," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To feel like someone else sees you when your own husband doesn't." I wanted to be angry, but I couldn't. Not anymore. Because the truth was, she wasn't wrong. Somewhere between late-night logins, work emails over dinner, and telling myself I was providing, I'd stopped being with her and started just being near her. We had become polite strangers. Routine. Predictable. And people like Clara don't survive in predictability. They wilt. Still, I didn't reply. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was afraid the wrong ones would end it all. That morning, I found her gone before sunrise. No note. No phone call. Just an empty closet and the silence of a house that suddenly echoed again. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Nothing. I called her sister. No, she hadn't heard from her. I drove around for hours, checking the yoga studio, her office, the building from the photos, even that cafe with the crooked chairs she always said felt like Paris. Nothing. I returned home around noon, exhausted, emotionally brittle, and walked into the kitchen for water. That's when I smelled it. Not food. Paper. Burnt paper. I opened the oven door on impulse and found it. A single envelope, charred at the edges, sitting on a baking tray like it had been left for me to find or to destroy. My name was written on it in her handwriting. Just Lowell. No love, no dear, no softness. Just the facts. I sat down at the kitchen table with trembling hands and unfolded it. It wasn't a goodbye. It was something worse. It was a list. A list of moments she remembered. The kind of list you write when you're not sure what else there is left to hold on to. The first time you made me laugh until I snorted wine. When we danced barefoot in the hallway at 2 a.m. When you kissed my shoulder instead of my lips because you thought I was asleep. When you told me you'd never be like your father. When you started becoming him anyway. I stopped reading after that. My hands were shaking too much. My throat was dry. It felt like she hadn't left the house. She'd surgically removed herself from it. From me. Not with rage. Not with drama. With precision. That was Clara. Always graceful. Even when she was breaking something. I called Davis one last time. Can you find her? I asked, voice hollow. He hesitated. I already did. I sat up straighter. My pulse jumped. She checked into a hotel. Under her maiden name. She's been there since sunrise. She hasn't left. I was already grabbing my keys. Davis added. She asked the front desk not to let anyone through. Not even family. Of course she did. Clara never needed guards. She built her own walls. But this time, I wasn't going to stay behind them. This time, I was going to knock. Or break. Or burn them down if I had to. The drive to the hotel was quiet. No music. No GPS. I knew the route by heart now. I parked across the street and stared at the front doors, watching people come and go, none of them her. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. My throat felt tight, like it knew there were too many words coming and not enough time to get them right. I didn't bring flowers. Or a speech. I didn't even bring her scarf. What do you carry to a moment that might break you? I walked into the lobby and gave her name. The woman at the front desk looked up with a mix of sympathy and protocol. She asked not to be disturbed, she said carefully. I nodded. I'm not here to disturb her. I'm here to ask her if she wants to try again. The woman hesitated, then slipped me a room number without another word. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. My footsteps felt loud on the carpet. I reached her door and raised my hand, but couldn't knock right away. What if she didn't answer? What if she did? Eventually, I did the only thing I could do. I knocked. Twice. There was a pause, and then the click of a lock. The door opened. She looked tired. Hair pulled back. No makeup. Just Clara. Raw. Real. The version of her I hadn't seen in years. Maybe I hadn't been looking. Neither of us spoke at first. Then I said, "Can I come in?" She stepped aside without a word. The room smelled like her shampoo. Like old memories. She sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed near the wall, like a guest in a stranger's story. I read the list, I said. She looked down. It wasn't a goodbye letter, I added. It was a map. She blinked. A map of how to get back to us. She let out a short, stunned laugh. Lowell, we're not. Perfect? No. We're not even okay right now. But you're still the only person I want to learn how to be better with. And I don't mean perfect. I mean honest. Real. Awkward. Scared. But trying. Together. Silence again. Heavy. Hopeful. Then she asked, "Do you really think we can fix this?" And I answered without thinking. I don't know. But I know I'll fight for it this time. She nodded slowly, then reached out for my hand. Something so simple, but it shattered me inside. We sat like that for a long time. Just two people holding each other after letting go for too long. That night, she didn't come home. But the next day, she did. Not as the same woman who left, but as someone ready to start over. And this time, so was I.